Erev Tov, everyone. Erev Tov. It is a dog barking in the background. She hears something. Yeah, I know. Yeah, something outside. Anyway, it is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the House of Seven Beggars. Therefore, it must be Zeyde's Story Corner. Yes, Zeyde's Story Corner once again. Okay, so we left off. We were reading this story. This is from the book, The Tales of Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And I have no idea what that dog is actually barking about. Well, it's not like anybody's here. Okay, well, anyway. So, this story is called the Merchant and the... okay, let's find out. Dog's got me all distracted here. So this is the Merchant and the Pauper. Yeah, the Merchant and the Pauper. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and this has been a rather long story, hasn't it? Yeah, the whole show last week. Yeah, we did the whole show last week and didn't get through the entire story. So just to bring you up to date, there was a merchant and a pauper, and they were friends, and they both had a dream that they would switch places, basically, that they would, the merchant would become a pauper, and the pauper would become a very rich man. And the merchant's, or the pauper's wife is kidnapped by a general, and the merchant feels so terrible about this whole thing that he goes to find her. Yeah, he goes to find her, and on the way he finds her and sneaks her out. And there are 7 places of water that they go to, and they hide while they're trying to make their way back home. And she makes a pledge to him at each one of these places, and has the waters actually be her witness. And so anyway, so she's returned, and they later on they both have children. The merchant has a son. Yes, the merchant has a son, and the pauper has a daughter. Yeah, and has a daughter. And they decide at some point that they are going to betroth these 2 children to each other. And as time goes on, the pauper becomes richer and richer, and eventually he is made a king, and then he becomes an emperor, and all this, and he no longer thinks that he wants to have this merchant's son as a son-in-law, and so he banishes him. Well, actually, he's going to have him killed. Yeah, he was going to have him killed, and then the empress, who had made all these pledges to the merchant, went and convinced them to let him go. He's let go, and he becomes anyway. So they have to come. The emperor wants the princess to be married, and all these suitors come, and she refuses them all because she's betrothed to this other one, because her mother tells her that she is betrothed to him, so she should wait for him. And she finds all these ways to keep these suitors from getting there. And anyway, so she gives him a map and so on and so forth. And that kind of, real briefly, I mean, if you really want to find the story, go to last week's broadcast and watch it there. And we are going to pick up now that the emperor has gotten rid of the son, and that now we have this murderer who comes into the story, and he's going to kidnap the daughter. Yeah, he's going to kidnap the beautiful daughter, And that's where we left off last week. That was our cliffhanger. And before we get too far, let's check the chat room and see who we have. We have Kat Belcher Brown, Kelsey Lynn, Donald, and I believe I saw Marshall, and Joe is here, and I think we got everybody there. Okay, so without further ado, yes, let's get on with the story. Okay, let's get on with the story. Let me get you onto your camera, and turn that one off, and we'll put. Did you make sure the microphone's on? Yeah, I did. I did make sure the microphone was on. Okay, so we can go on with the story. Okay, everybody. Okay. So, I'm going to back up just a little bit so that, kind of as a reminder, so we come back here that this is talking about the murderer. Nobody could force him to act otherwise. The emperor's daughter decided to go to him. Remember, he had the ship with all the fancy stuff on there. As was her custom on leaving the palace, she veiled her face, lest anyone who saw her beauty be smitten by it and fall into a swoon. Remember the swoon from last week? That was the swoon. Okay. So now you are pretty much caught up. Anyway, together with some of her companions and a guard, she visited the merchant, who was none other than the murderous scoundrel, and purchased various objects. When they departed, the merchant told her that if she came again, he would show her even more beautiful objects, wonderful and rare. She visited the merchant again, buying things. After a while, she became a regular visitor on the ship. Remember, he would not leave the ship because he was planning on kidnapping her. Okay, so one day, he opened this special chamber where the gold birds were standing. And when she saw them, she was overcome with amazement. The soldiers and her companions also wanted to look, but he refused to let them, telling her, No, I won't show them to anybody but you, for you are the emperor's daughter. So she went in by herself. But he followed her, locked the door, overpowered her, and put her into a sack. And that's where we left off last week. So we pick up again. Then he stripped off her clothes and gave them to a sailor to wear, also making him veil his face. He pushed the sailor out and told him to leave. The sailor had no idea what was happening and walked off the ship. And the soldiers and companions who were waiting for the emperor's daughter joined him. And he followed them to the palace. Here, his face was unveiled. And there was a great commotion and furor, as you can imagine there would be, The sailor was slapped on his face, but as it was clear that he knew nothing and was not guilty, they threw him out. The murderer, knowing well that they would be pursued, left the ship with the emperor's daughter and hid together with her in a cistern until the danger passed. Beforehand, he had charged the sailors on the ship to raise anchor and set sail immediately, reassuring them that the pursuers would not shoot at the ship in which they thought the emperor's daughter was held captive. Actually, he did not care if the ship was intercepted. Like all reckless scoundrels, he was indifferent to what befell him or anyone else. And so it was. The alarm was raised. The pursuit was given. The ship was caught, but, of course, the emperor's daughter was not on it. Hiding with her in the cistern, the murderer warned her to make no noise or call for help. I have risked my life to capture you. If I lose you, my life will be worth nothing. So, I have no scruples, and if you make the slightest sound, I shall strangle you at once. Come what may, I know how little I am worth, and I don't care what happens to me. Such a pleasant guy, huh? Okay, anyway. The emperor's daughter was mortally afraid and kept silent. When they left the cistern, they roamed in the city until once more they were in danger of being discovered, whereupon they hid in another place of water, a bathing place. Is this starting to sound familiar, huh? If it doesn't, go back to last week and listen to the first part. Okay. This was repeated 7 times in the very same 7 kinds of places of concealment in which the merchant had once hidden her mother. They were the places of water and were witnesses to her mother's oath. A cistern, a bathing place, a lake, a spring, a creek, and a river. And eventually they came to the sea. There, he found a small fishing vessel and set sail with her. He did not desire her for himself, being a eunuch, but he wished to sell her to a king, fearing that she would be recognized. He dressed her as a sailor, so that she looked like a man. Thus, they crossed the sea. Well, a tempest arose and tossed the fishing vessel onto the shore, breaking it up completely. Sound familiar? Now, the shore was none other than the desert land upon which the young man had once been shipwrecked, and where he had found himself a place to live. The murderer, who was acquainted with shipping routes, knew that no vessels visited that shore. He thus knew that there was no danger of discovery. and he let her walk by herself. They each went in search of food, and the emperor's daughter managed to elude him. As soon as the scoundrel realized that she was out of sight, he began to shout. She did not answer, realizing that there was no need. Were he to discover her, she could always pretend that she did not hear him. As his aim was to sell her, he would have nothing to gain by killing her. So she kept quiet and eluded him. Clever girl, huh? The murderer searched for her in vain, and eventually he was devoured by wild beasts. Good for him. She wandered on, finding food on the way. After a while, she reached the place where the young man, the merchant's son, had settled. She was unkempt and dressed like a sailor, and they did not recognize each other. Still, he was very happy to have someone to talk to. He asked the apparent sailor, "How did you get here?" She answered, "I was with a merchant at sea, and we were shipwrecked." He told her that he, too, had been with a merchant at sea and had been shipwrecked, and the two of them lived together. Now, the empress, the beautiful girl's mother, the empress was grief-stricken by her daughter's abduction. She beat her head against the wall and blamed her husband, the emperor, saying that because of his pride, he had killed the young man, and now he had lost their daughter. She wept, saying that their daughter had been all their good fortune and prosperity, and now she was gone. "What is left to me?" she moaned. The emperor was already grieved at the loss of his daughter, and her accusations added much to the anger and strife between them. He grew so furious that he decided to get rid of her. Accordingly, he arranged for a court of justice to banish her. Just like Queen Esther, eh? Well, actually, not Esther, but, the queen before Esther. Okay. When the emperor next sent his armies to war, they failed him. He placed the blame on the general, saying the war had been lost because of his mistakes. The general was banished. Then once again, he sent his armies, and once again, they failed. And yet, another general was banished. In this way, several generals were dismissed the citizens soon realized that strange things were happening, that the emperor had banished first the empress and then all the generals. And they thought that perhaps it should have been the other way around. Accordingly, they banished the emperor and restored the empress and the generals. The empress's first act was, as a ruler, was to send for the merchant and his wife and have them brought to live in the palace. Okay, so that takes care of one problem. Okay, let's see what happens. When the emperor was dismissed, he pleaded to be given his liberty. I have been your emperor, and I have done many good things. So have mercy on me, and let me be free to move about in my exile. I shall never return, and you need have no fear of me. Let me go and live the rest of my days in peace. So, the emperor, too, went into exile. Everybody going into exile. What is up with that? Seems like it's a fashionable thing to do here, huh? Okay, well, at long last, he reached the sea. You see where this is going, huh? He reached the sea and set sail. A tempest arose. You know, I don't think I would be sailing in that area because every time you turn around, there's a tempest there. Well, why don't you just go on with the story and let's find out what's going on here. Well, I'm just saying, that's all. Okay. A tempest arose and cast him onto the very same shore upon which his daughter had been shipwrecked. He walked through the desert until he reached the place where the merchant's son and his own beautiful daughter, now dressed as a sailor, were living together. They did not recognize each other, for several years had elapsed, and their hair, too, had grown long and wild. They asked him how he had come there, and he told them that he had been traveling with a merchant and had been shipwrecked. They told him that that was how they, too, had come to be there. Thus, the three of them lived together, eating of the fruits of the trees and drinking from the stream. They made music, for each was able to play instruments. The young man was strongest and most capable, for he had been there the longest. So he hunted and brought them meat. They burned wood, which in towns is more precious than gold. The young man sought to prove that this was the best place to spend the rest of their days, there in the wilderness. It was a much better life than the pursuers in towns and cities, he said. They asked him what kind of life he had led before coming there that enabled him to state that this life was better. He told them that he had been the son of a rich merchant and had had everything that he desired. But here too, he had everything he wanted. And he continued to prevail upon them to spend the rest of their lives where they were. The emperor asked him whether he had heard about the emperor, to which the young man replied that he had. Then the emperor asked whether he had heard about the emperor's beautiful daughter. This time, too, the young man replied that he had. He became very angry, declaring that the emperor was a murderer. He did not know, of course, that he was speaking to the emperor himself. The emperor asked why, and the young man said that he was there because of the emperor's cruelty and pride. The emperor asked how this was so, and since the young man had nothing to fear, he told the whole story of what had befallen him. Previously, he had said only that he was a merchant's son. The emperor asked him, "Were the emperor to fall into your hands now, would you take your revenge on him?" "No," he answered, "for he was a merciful man. On the contrary, I would look after him just as I am taking care of you." The emperor began to bemoan all the evil and bitterness that had befallen his emperor. For he had heard, so he said, that his beautiful daughter had been abducted, and he himself banished. The merchant's son said that it was because of the emperor's cruelty and pride that he had lost his daughter and been banished himself, and that for the same reason he, the young man, had found his way here. It was all the emperor's fault. Whereupon the emperor asked him again, "Were the emperor here, would you revenge yourself on him?" And again the young man answered that he would not. "I would look after him just as I am taking care of you." Then the emperor revealed that he was himself none other than the emperor, and he told him everything that had befallen him. And we are going to take a break here. We are going to take a 6-minute break, and when we return, we shall find out what the young man does to the emperor now that he knows who he is. So everybody stay tuned. We will be back in 6.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back, just as promised. Okay, let's see. Some people came in while I was reading. Let's see. We have Ariella and Zev and Ethan. Good to have you with us, Ethan. And let's see, we have Veronica and Geketa and Kat and David and Stephen. And I think that catches us up all. Sorry if we missed anybody. Okay, so what do you think the young man is going to do now that he knows that the emperor is standing right there? Remember, the emperor was trying to get him killed. Let's find out. Then the emperor revealed that he was himself none other than the emperor. And he told him everything that had befallen him. The young man took him in his arms, embraced him, and kissed him, while the beautiful daughter, who was disguised as a sailor, looked on and listened to all that passed between them. Every day, the young man was wont to go out to the forest to search for the hidden letter. Remember, the letter was hidden in a tree, and then the storm came and blew all the trees down, and he couldn't find it? Okay, he's going out and trying to find it. There were thousands upon thousands of trees, and each day he went out and cut a mark on the tree, in the trees in which he had searched that day. When he returned, his eyes were always tearful from weeping. They asked him what he was seeking that brought him back with tearful eyes. And he told them the entire story of the letter the emperor's daughter had sent him, of how he had hidden it in a tree for safekeeping, and how the tempest, I tell you, that is a very dangerous area. Every time you turn around, there's a tempest or something. But anyway, how he had hidden it in the tree for safekeeping, and how the tempest had utterly changed the appearance of the forest. He was still searching for the letter, and still hoped to find it. Then they said to him, "Tomorrow we will come to search with you. Perhaps we will be successful." So they began to accompany him to the forest, and each of them searched among the trees, until one day the emperor's daughter found the letter. She saw that it was indeed the letter she had sent him in her own handwriting. However, she felt that it would be dangerous were she to reveal everything at once. Were she suddenly to disclose her identity, remove her disguise, and reappear in her former beauty, the shock would be too much for the young man, and he might faint or die. Well, she must be really beautiful. Well, she must be. Furthermore, she wanted to be married properly, so they could not stay in the wilderness. So she gave him the letter, merely telling him where she had found it. He fainted, but they revived him, and there was much rejoicing among them. Afterwards, however, the young man said, "What do I need the letter for now? Where can I find her? She is certainly with some king by now. What do I need it all for anyway? I shall spend the rest of my life here." So he returned the letter to her, saying, "Here, you take the letter, find her, and marry her." For she was just like a man. She let herself be persuaded, but begged him to accompany her, saying, "I shall surely find her, and it will go well with me. But I should like to share my good fortune with you." Oh, just like her mother, huh? The young man saw that she, whom he thought was a sailor, was very clever, and was sure to win the emperor's daughter. So he was pleased to accompany him, that is, the emperor's daughter. The emperor wanted to remain there alone, for he was afraid to return to the land over which he had once ruled. But the sailor, that is his daughter, persuaded him to come along too. Were he to win the beautiful maiden, there would be nothing to fear. The wheel of fortune would be reversed, and the emperor restored. So the three of them set out and hired a ship. They crossed the sea and came to the land where the empress ruled. As they approached the city, the daughter thought that were she to reveal herself to her mother too suddenly, the shock would be too much. So she first sent the empress a message that someone had arrived with information about her daughter. Then the daughter went in person and told the empress everything that had befallen her daughter. At the end, the daughter said, "And she is here." Then she told the truth. "It is I. I am your daughter." She also told her mother that her bridegroom, the merchant's son, was there too. In addition, she said that she wanted her father restored to his country. At first, her mother would not hear of it, as she was still angry at him for having been the cause of all the trouble. But for her daughter's sake, she agreed. First, however, it would be necessary to find him, and nobody knew where he was. Then the daughter said, "He, too, is here. together with us. Then the merchant's son and the beautiful daughter were wed, and the happiness was complete. The new couple received the kingdom and the empire, and they ruled over the whole world. Amen. There. Took us almost 2 whole days to read that story. It's a good story, huh? Ah, Rabbi Moshe of Tzavat is here. So happy to have you with us tonight. Okay. We are going to start another story. Probably won't be able to finish it tonight, as you might expect. This one is called The King's Son and the Son of the Maid. This is one of my favorite stories. You know that? Yes, I know that. I know. It's one of your favorites. You talk about it all the time. I can't help it. It's a wonderful story. Okay. So, once there was a king. Short story, yeah? Oh, that's not the whole story. Okay, I go on. Okay. Once there was a king. In his household, there was a certain maid who served the queen. Now, she was not a simple cook who would never be allowed in the king's presence, but a maid-in-waiting of modest rank. When the time came for the queen to deliver her child, the maid too was ready to give birth. The midwife, for no other reason than to see what would come of it, exchanged the babies. She took the king's son and laid it next to the maid, and she laid the maid's son next to the queen. Can you imagine such a thing? Okay. The boys began to grow up, and the so-called son of the king, who was really the son of the servant, was given much honor and respect. He was raised up higher and higher and became greatly exalted. Meanwhile, the maid's son, that is, the king's true son, grew up in the king's household, and both children studied together in the same class. The king's true son was by nature drawn to regal ways, even though he was brought up in the home of a servant. Conversely, the maid's son, who was known as the king's son, was drawn to ways that were not those of a king. But as he was brought up in the house of the king, he had to behave according to the regal manners that he had been taught. Now, women are incapable of keeping a secret. Boy, are we going to get letters on that. I know. I didn't write it, folks. Don't blame me. It's the story. Okay, no letters, please. Okay. Now, women are incapable of keeping a secret. And after a while, the midwife told someone how she had exchanged the two infants. As this man had a friend, and this friend also had a friend, the secret naturally became known. And before long, everyone was talking about how the king's son had been exchanged. Nevertheless, the people did not speak about it openly, lest the matter become known to the king. After all, what could he possibly do about it? How could he undo what had been done? Besides, why should he believe such a tale? It might well be false. So, although people continued whispering the story about, it was felt that the king should not be told. One day, someone revealed the secret to the king's false son, telling him what people were saying about his having been exchanged. Still, this person added, I think it's beneath your dignity to investigate the matter. I'm only telling you this in case there's ever a conspiracy against the kingdom. The rumor could be advantageous to the conspirators. You ought to think about getting rid of this possible pretender. The false prince began to harass the father of the other son, who was really his own father. He did the father injury whenever he could, for he wanted to cause him so much trouble that he would be compelled to take his son and depart. As long as the king was alive, the false prince had little power. But still, he managed to make life difficult for his supposed rival. When the king grew old and died, the false prince succeeded him. He began to oppress the father and the other son more than ever, though he did this in such a way that no one would know what was going on, for such things would not seem right to the people. The supposed father of the other son understood that he was being vexed because of the rumor about the exchange. And he told his supposed son the whole story. I have great pity for you, whoever you are, he concluded. If you are really my son, how can I help feeling sorry for you? And if you are not my son, but the son of the king, you are all the more to be pitied, for the false king will stop at nothing to get rid of you. God forbid. You must flee from this place. Now, as you can imagine, this upset the youth greatly. But the new king continued to inflict so many hardships upon him that at last he decided to go into exile. His foster father gave him a considerable amount of money, and he departed. The youth was very upset about being driven from his country for no reason. He considered his situation. What have I done to deserve exile? If I am the king's son, I certainly should not be treated like this. And if I am not the king's son, I have done no evil, and there is no reason for me to be cast out. In his bitterness, he took to drinking and frequenting brothels, desiring nothing more than to spend his time gratifying his desires. And that, my dear friends, is where we are going to pause for this evening. And we will find out about the rest of the story next week. You going to make it? Yeah, I think I'm going to make it. Got a little tickle there. I thought you were running it. Yes, I'm running it. Don't worry about it. Okay, so, anyway. Don't forget that on Wednesday night is this Torah study with Rabbi A and Reb Ruben, and Shabbat services at 8 p.m. on Kabbalat and Mariv, the Shabbat service, and Shachrit and Musaf at 10 a.m. And then, of course, I will be back on Monday to finish this story. I hope you all enjoyed it. And until next time, we say, Laila Tov.